Hello and happy holidays. I got a holiday special for you this week. It's going to be only data charts and visuals for like the top 200 or so teams in the country in college basketball. I'm going to go through the overall efficiency landscape, three-point shooting, turnover margin, and of course, the Trapezoid of Excellence. What would be a data chart video from me without doing the trapezoid? So let's start with the efficiency charts. You'll notice there are kind of 5 teams that are elite metrically and separating from the rest. Auburn is just an absolute joke, especially offensively. I think on KenPom, they're like the highest rated offense in KenPom history right now. Tennessee is up there. Duke's defense has been absolutely unbelievable. I think Cooper Flagg and Kaman Malawak are huge pieces of that because the second they come in, they have the best defense in the country. And Houston and Gonzaga are interesting because they each have 3 losses. But when you go look at their losses, like I'm looking at Gonzaga, they lost to West Virginia and Kentucky, both in overtime, and then UConn by 6 in MSG, which is basically a UConn home game. And then Houston lost by 5 to Auburn, who's clearly the best team in the country right now. And then they lost to Alabama and San Diego State on neutral floors in overtime. It's not good when you lose. You don't want to lose games, but I think the metrics support these 2 teams still being top 10, but maybe even 5 teams in the country. Arizona and Ohio State are the really tricky teams because they have been so hot and cold, for the most part cold, especially Arizona. Ohio State at least has like that Kentucky win and a couple, but they're really hard teams to figure out. Alabama was here last year at this point. They were 6-5. They were playing great teams and losing games. The metrics, numbers, and data supported them still being a top 10 to 20 team in the country. Now, Alabama last year, eye test and everything possible, was better than Arizona and Ohio State are now, but it's the principle that, hey, maybe the numbers are saying something that Arizona and Ohio State are going to be okay. Only time will really tell, but it worked for Alabama last year. Looking at the worst of the bunch, if you're a mid-major team here, I really wouldn't worry a lot. This kind of happens in non-conference play with adjusted schedules. But at the same time, like teams like Princeton, GCU, even St. Louis, Louisiana Tech, UNLV, these are good teams here that I personally expected to be ranking higher at this point in the year. But if you're a power team here, Seton Hall, Minnesota, Wake Forest, that one is a little surprising. Virginia, Virginia Tech, BC, Washington, K-State, even Syracuse and Rutgers, it's not great. And Rutgers is the really interesting one because they obviously had a lot of expectations with Dylan and Ace coming in, but their defense has not been good. Their offense has been basically through the 2 of them and nobody else. I really think, especially on the defensive end, they're missing that big presence. They've been playing guys like Emmanuel Ogbole, Zach Martini, and just throwing different options at the 5 with no consistency, but especially defensively without having that protector like Cliff Amore that they had for the last few years. They've been struggling. It's not perfect, but you will notice there's kind of a correlation of having a good offense and good defense. There are teams like Villanova and Miami who I put in that echelon of like the 2016 Chino Hills as defense. And then the other end of the spectrum is the UCLA, the Cincy, VCU type range. Like these are good teams, but they're defense first. And when you look at those 2 groups, Miami and Villanova versus Cincy, UCLA, San Diego State, VCU, like defense first teams tend to be better than strictly offense first teams. And I wanted to do a mid-major focus. And I'm not really talking about like Gonzaga, the Mountain West teams, and some of the A-10 teams because we know that San Diego State, Dayton, Gonzaga, or Utah State are good. You won't really see true mid-majors separate until conference play. I'm looking at the teams that are kind of in the average national scale right now. I'm watching the MVC. We know Drake is really good. We know about Bradley. They've talked about Belmont, Murray State, but even UNI, like the MVC is a great league, and some of these teams, as they go on to win more games in that conference, will kind of rise in here. It was just UC Irvine at first in the Big West, but UC San Diego has been awesome. They beat them, so those 2 teams are definitely to watch there. And then the Ivy League, Princeton has struggled a little bit, but Yale, Cornell, Columbia, and Princeton are all kind of in this cluster together. I would still take Princeton because I know that their quality, it has a higher ceiling than the rest of the teams, but that's going to be an interesting one to see play out. On to 3-point shooting from an offensive perspective. It's going to be 3-point attempt rate, how often you shoot threes from left to right, and then the efficiency, how often you're making your threes going up and down. The first thing that jumps out is obviously Bradley. They are in a ridiculous sweet spot, and my God, can they shoot it? But they don't really like overly rely on the 3, right? They're basically at national average, with how often they shoot the 3 because their entire offense is very good. And I love that in a team because you shoot so well and you win a lot of the times because of it, but you don't need that to win and only that. Because if you have a cold shooting night or you play against a really good perimeter defense, you're going to lose that game. That does go for the other teams in this middle range like Purdue, Xavier, Texas Tech, Butler, even Nova. Like just because you're not shooting, 46, 47% from 3, which is an unfathomable and unrealistic amount. Shooting 40% from 3 is fantastic and elite, so that's great. And the teams that rank high here are mostly good, but you don't need the three ball to win. Look at the bottom left and take teams like Michigan State, even Utah State, Texas A&M are down here. These teams in the bottom left can't shoot it, but they also don't shoot it because they know that they're not the best outside shooting teams. There are a decent amount of not so great teams here, but I mentioned Michigan State, like, you know, they have pieces that can win without the three, but they also have guys that can shoot it. So if a team here is winning games without shooting the three, what happens when they figure it out for a game or a streak of games and they can shoot the three? If you're a team in the top left, that could indicate that you're missing out on an opportunity to shoot more because you don't shoot it a lot, but you shoot it super, super well. There really aren't a ton of teams here because majority, if not all teams, are maximizing their three-point output. That's the beauty of analytics and maximizing your highest percentage of efficiency and having the most points possible. That's why the NBA loves the three ball and high percentage two so much and nothing really in between. And then the opposite of those teams, when you go to the bottom right, are teams that are probably shooting the three ball too much. They're shooting way higher than national average, but they're shooting way lower efficiency and make rate than national average. And this holiday break time of the year is the perfect time of the year to make those changes. Look at a team like VCU in their last 5 games. They're more towards the middle in that like Santa Clara, Air Force, Wisconsin range, which is great. They identified that they were shooting the three ball too much, so they dialed it back. They're using a different scheme to get better looks, and they're shooting at a better rate. Turnover margin is definitely one of my favorite charts to look at, especially for March and especially for teams that are lower seeds and you're looking for underdogs for upsets. If you're on the double negative bottom left of this chart, I find it hard to trust you at all. You turn the ball over at a high rate and you don't really force turnovers out of your opponents. This has been a Michigan problem all season and in their losses, even though they're a good team. Memphis is a great example. They can be kind of reckless and you'll see them win games by 20 against good teams and also lose to average teams by 20. And you'll notice that majority of the teams here are not great teams outside of a few handful. Teams in the top left force a lot of turnovers, but they also turn it over a lot. There aren't a ton of teams here. They're usually faster paced teams that get into some hectic games because, like, think about it theoretically, right? If there's a ton of turnovers both ways, the ball is going out of bounds here, it's going over there, steals here, like, it's kind of a wild, high volatility game. I mentioned Memphis is here. Charleston likes to play fast paced. Drake is up here, which is a little surprising. Seton Hall is a little bit of a mess right now. Samford, FSU. These teams' outcomes are going to be all over the place from game to game. Then the bottom right are usually the offensive-minded teams. They kind of just want to go out there and hoop and let their guys cook. Kentucky is a prime example. Elite offense. Auburn is the same exact way. Dayton, Carolina is up here, which is a perfect example. Temple, Gonzaga. And the top right teams are going to make your life an absolute living hell. They're going to force every mistake out of you, but they're not going to make mistakes on the offensive end. They take care of the ball very, very well. Iowa State has been known for this. UCLA, UC San Diego, Maryland, Ole Miss. Marquette's defense has been incredible and much, much improved. It's not a one-to-one thing. Like, if you have a great turnover margin, you're going to win the national championship and you're going to win every game. In a vacuum, these teams tend to win more, and I think they're more trustworthy because having a positive turnover margin is through coaching, discipline. It simplifies the game and gives you a really, really good floor, which makes you trustworthy. And last but not least is, of course, the Trapezoid of Excellence. It's pace going horizontally, so slow on the left, fast on the right by adjusted net rating, which is basically just your overall efficiency and performance. We'll start at the bottom, and then on the left, these are your teams that are honestly just rough and tough to watch right now. They play slow and grueling, but it doesn't work. If you play slow and aren't good, it's unlikely that you can just speed it up and be better. But for teams in the bottom right, maybe they're playing too fast and maybe they can slow the game down a little bit, adjust their strategy to become more efficient and have better chances to win games. I look at St. Louis, Georgia Tech, Ohio. Teams like Samford and New Mexico are tough because they've kind of proven that their system and playing like this can work in their conference to win a conference championship, get to the NCAA tournament, and make some noise. I just think playing like this caps your ceiling because clearly you're not playing it at a high enough level. Now, there's two ways I really like to use this chart. The first one is obviously the trapezoid itself. Auburn, Duke, Tennessee, Gonzaga, Iowa State, Kansas are good and ranking up here. That's not really a surprise at all. And you can find surprising teams that are maybe underrated right now. Like I see Maryland and Texas Tech and Cincy, even Ohio State and Pitt right now. We like these teams because they don't rely on one style of play, playing super fast or super slow. They're more adaptable and flexible to their opponent. Take Oregon, for example, who's not even at the top of this chart, but they beat Alabama and San Diego State in back-to-back games with only a couple days rest time on a neutral floor. Alabama playing all the way fast, San Diego State being more on the slow side. That's exactly what March is. You're playing on a neutral court. You're playing with 1-2 days short turnaround times when you don't know who your next opponent's going to be until it finally comes about and you don't have enough time to scout. So that's why the top performers and the national champion in March tend to be ranking high in this trapezoid. The second way I use this is to find disparities and maybe some irregularities. Now, the top right teams are very, very good, but they play one style. They play very, very fast. And when you're really good at it, that's great. For teams like Kentucky and Alabama are good examples. When they're going to play in games that are shootouts, they're probably going to win those games. And when they play each other in SEC play is a different story. I couldn't really tell you there. This is how Alabama got to the Final Four last year. This is how Miami did it the year before that. You can really run up the score. You have a great chance to make a run in March off of being so good at that one style until you run into a team like Auburn this year, where UConn was last year, that knows how to play against that and knows how to take you out of that style and kind of adapt to you. On the contrary, in the top left, you have teams that play one style, but they play slower. Houston, Cincy, UConn, Dayton, they like to play in the half court. Most of them are more defensive minded here. They are going to dismantle bad teams. Houston is a great example of that. When they play inferior opponents, they have literally zero chance. So this style, in my opinion, offers a great floor. But do you have the capability and the offensive ceiling to go toe-to-toe with a team like Alabama or Gonzaga or Illinois when they're playing at their best? Offense at its peak and defense at its peak, it's hard to stop offense at its peak. To be fair, that's kind of been Houston's downfall in March for the last few years. They get into an offensive battle and they can't keep up, and you see them struggle in those games a lot. The short story is, if you play one style, one speed, one pace, you're more susceptible to an upset. There's a higher variability of outcome in every single one of your games. Ask Kentucky last year, ask New Mexico, ask Arizona, who all played super fast, or St. Mary's, who played super slow. Like, you need to have a good floor of defense to win a title and to succeed, for sure, but you need the offensive ceiling to really, really succeed. So when I see a team like Iowa State that has proven this year that they can play faster than they normally do and they can compete and win in offensive shootouts, I think that's really encouraging for their contention to win a national title. Maryland and Michigan State are very surprisingly both playing faster than they normally do, and they're both playing very well at it, which is good to see. Just to shine a light on some of the smaller mid-majors, most of these teams aren't trying to win a national title, right? If you're not Gonzaga, and then maybe teams like a San Diego State, Dayton, Memphis, whatever, playing one style can almost be good as a lower seed, as a smaller school, as an underdog, because when you come up against a power team who doesn't play that way and isn't used to playing against that style, they might be very uncomfortable into where you can win a game. So watch out for a team like a URI or New Mexico that plays super fast, or Drake on the opposite end of the spectrum. The trapezoid is best used for the teams in the trapezoid, the teams that are the best on this chart. With the way college basketball is set up, when you're adaptable and flexible to your opponent's style and you're playing at a high level, that gives you a great floor and the highest ceiling to win in March 100%. We saved the best for last for the trapezoid, so that is going to do it. If you're not subscribed, I would greatly appreciate that. Hope everybody has a happy, healthy, and safe holidays. Appreciate y'all for being here as always. Goodbye.